So let's make some carrying straps for our Doll's House Quiet book. This is actually a really simple process. If you have ever made double fold bias tape, that's basically what we're going to do here. We're going to take our nice flat pieces and fold them in half, wrong sides together, and give that a really good press. And then I've already pressed this one so that I can kind of just use it as an example. Then we're going to open it back out. So the first press is just along that center seam, just like that. Then you open it back out and you press each of the long side seams in to match that center crease. You just want to give that a really good press and then fold it closed one more time along that center seam and give that a really good press. Then all you're going to do is top stitch 1/8 of an inch from each of the long edges. Do that for the second one as well, and we'll be ready to install our straps. So we've completed both of our straps and we are ready to attach them to our house. So I've got the front of my house right here, and I have marked from the pattern where I need to attach my straps. So I'm just going to turn this around and lay this down. I want to make sure that there's no twist in this, so I'm going to line this up right here and clip it in place, and then make sure there's no twist because you want that to be nice and smooth. And then just clip that in place. And we're going to, the instructions have you baste this in place. And what I'm going to actually do is sew over this within the seam allowance a few times back and forth, because I worry that a little one picking it up and tossing it around like I, might have done when I was a child. I would just want that to be a little bit more secure than just sewn in place like it will be in a future step. So I'm going to just sew back and forth over it just a couple of times. And while I am at my machine doing this kind of work, I'm also going to take my ribbon and stitch that in place as well. So that needs to be 2 inches from the bottom, clipped in place, and also 2 inches from the top. And I'm just using the measuring on my table because it doesn't really need to be perfect. As long as your front and your back match, it's going to be just fine. So I'm going to take that to my machine, and instead of basting those in place, I'm actually going to sew them in place with a little bit more security. And I'm going to do the same thing to the back of my house, and then I'll come right back for the next step. Okay, so I have my handles sewn onto both my front and my back, and then also the ribbons. Please remember to sew the ribbon on the opposite side of the back because they need to match when they're sewn together. So the next step is going to be to take your front and your back and put them right sides together along that edge that doesn't have the ribbons on it. So if you're looking at the front of the house, it'll be the left side. And you're just going to stitch down this side seam right here. And then you're going to press that open. You can choose to top stitch if you want. I'll talk about all of that when I come back. So I'm going to take this to my machine and stitch this side seam right here. Okay, so we have our front and our back sewn together along this side seam. I have also pressed that seam open from the wrong side. You can choose to top stitch here on either side of the seam if you would like. That is completely optional. I completely forgot to mention, after I finished sewing on the strap and the ribbon, you might have noticed that I tied the ribbon around the strap. And that's just as we finish constructing this. That's going to give me a little bit of help making sure that these don't end up in any of the seams that I sew. And it's just one little thing that I do to kind of help myself along the way. So I repeated this side seam already for the 2 rooms that I want to be on the opposite side of the front and the back of the house. So if you've only done the 4 rooms, which is the minimum to make this, these will just be the 2 rooms that you have. You can pick which order you want them in. If you have done, like I have, where I have 8 rooms, including the front and back of the house, you kind of need to sit down and figure out what you want next to each other. If you want them in a specific order, if you want them to be random, just sew sides together until you've run out of pairs. I sat down and figured out what order I wanted things in because I did have a specific vision for what order I wanted my rooms to come in. But whatever it is, sew that side seam for each of the pairs of rooms that you have, in the front and the back, and then each pair. And then what you're going to do is take this pair and place it right sides together with the front and back of the house. And you're going to, I start matching at this center point right here. I like to make sure that my centers match perfectly. And up here that my centers match perfectly. And then just finish clipping all the way around both sides, the front and the back of the house. Add as many or as few clips as you need in order to be comfortable sewing. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew all the way around both house shapes, leaving a gap in one side right here because you're going to want to be able to turn that right sides out. So I'm going to leave a gap right here. And so that I remember to do that, I'm actually going to add 2 little extra clips right here. So I remember, Stephanie, hey, don't sew these bits. You want to be able to stick your hand in there and pull this out. So I'm going to finish clipping and then take that to the machine. And the only other note that I have is to, when you're sewing and when you're clipping, if you have pieces that are loose like this, make sure you push them down in as far as you can. That's part of why I tied those ribbons to those handles. But push those all down inside, and as you're sewing each seam, just maybe open it up and double check that you haven't got anything extra where you're going to be sewing, so that you don't accidentally snag any of your room decorations or the handles or ribbons when you're sewing this seam. So sew all the way around minus this gap, and then we'll come right back here and do the next step. Okay, so we have sewn all the way around the 2 house shapes except for this spot right here so we can stick our hand in here. The next step is going to be to trim the corners. You want to clip those corners so you get nice, beautiful finishes inside. You do want to be sure to clip right up to your stitches, but not through them. If you clip through them, you'll end up with a hole in your house, and nobody wants that. That's not covered by insurance. But if you do accidentally clip through stitches, just pop that right back on the machine and sew a little bit of extra stitch line just right inside of where you accidentally clipped through. That's not the end of the world. What you want to do right here is clip right down that seam just up to your stitch line. And it's a lot of stuff to clip through. So take your time, do it in a couple little snips if you need to, but all the way up to, but not through your stitch line right there. All the way around, just clipping my corners. Making sure I'm not taking any more than I have to, but just making sure I get all the way to my stitch line. And I'm just going to double check that I didn't snip anything too far. Everything looks really good. So I am ready to turn this right sides out. So this is the fun magic part that I'm so excited about. You just stick your hand right in here, grab the opposite side, and very, very gently start pulling it out. So you do want to make sure not to just tug, because you might rip something. But you just want to pull that out so everything is right sides out. Gentle, gentle, gentle. Make sure you really get that flip once you get over here. And be careful with the ribbons and the little pieces like the phone and things like that, because if they get snagged and they start pulling, you might just damage your house before your little one even has an opportunity to play with it. So here we go, we're done. No, I'm just kidding. At this point, you want to come in with that chopstick or that blunt object, whatever it is you use in your craft room or studio or sewing space, whatever you call it, to get those corners nice and neat. So you just want to push out all the corners nice and carefully. Make sure it's nice and beautiful. Come get all the corners, all the spots. And the better job, the more thorough you are now, the better it'll look in the end. And I like to run my chopstick along the seam lines as I'm going. I think that it really helps me get a better press, a cleaner press on it. And it shows me if I have any basting stitches that are, oh, see, I have a hole in that corner. Not a problem at all. I'm glad I caught it now. I'm just going to flip that right back out and take just a little bit of a deeper seam allowance right at that corner. See, mistakes are totally okay. We have that all fixed up now. And chopstick proof. And I just have this one rooftop to go, I think. And I start in the center and just work my way up. That rooftop, and then get this other corner. So all of my stuff is flat and nice and beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a really, really, really good press all the way around. Make sure that this opening gets pressed inside so that it's nice and beautiful and ready for top stitching. And then I'm going to top stitch all the way around the outside of my house. So this is something that is definitely going to be visible from both sides. So if you really hate the idea of having the same thread showing up all over the place because your rooms don't necessarily match the same thread, you can either change out your bobbin and your top stitching thread as needed as you hit a seam, or you can just press really, really well, and I mean really well, like all the steam you have ever put into a pressing project. And then you could whip stitch this opening closed. This top stitching definitely does add a little bit of stability, and it adds just one more stitch over those handles and those ribbons for a little bit more security, but it's not necessary. If you really want the clean finish with no top stitching, that is totally okay. It's completely up to you. So I'm going to give this a really good press and then top stitch all the way around, and then I'll be back. So I have top stitched all the way around both sets of the book and given it a really good press. So if you have done 2 pages, you are officially done. However, if you have not done 2 pages, if you've gone a little bit crazy and done 4 pages instead, you're going to do all of those same steps to your other sets of pages. So you match the pairs, and then you put them right sides together and sewed around the outside, leaving that gap for turning. And then you are set to go with a second set of books. The only thing you don't have to do is the handles and the ribbon, because this will be self-contained inside of this book. So all you do to attach these is you just want to line them up along that center line. And you can use pins, you can use, I would highly, highly recommend quilter's pins, something really thick and very sturdy. These, my clips won't even go around this, it's so thick. So you just need to pin down the center line right here and top stitch. You just want to top stitch very carefully down the middle. Try to get it into the seam of both books. Take it very, 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 very slow. This is a lot of fabric to go through, particularly at the ends. So you really want to take it slow. You don't want any broken needles flying about. But go ahead and do that top stitching. Attach it with quilter's pins or safety pins, whatever it is you have on hand that will work for this. Or I am a big fan of just not using pins in general. So I'm going to go at it pin free and take my time and stitch that very carefully. And then I will be back with my finished book. Okay, so that is it. You can just barely see my stitches right here in the ditch. Stitching in the ditch, if you're a quilter, you should be familiar with that term. And I still continued with that white thread, so I'm pretty pleased at how quick and easy that was considering how thick it is. And I didn't do too shabby on the outside either. So I'm pretty happy with that result. My book now has 4 pages and is ready for toddler hands to come and play and enjoy and have tons and tons of fun. So I really hope that you enjoyed this sew along as much as I did. I had so much fun getting creative and using up fabric scraps, and I really hope that the little one that I send this to enjoys it as much as I enjoyed making it. No doll's house is complete without little dollies to play in there, right? So why don't we walk through making one of the dollies. All of them are made the same way. You just need 2 mirror image pair, and then you can embroider or paint or use vinyl or whatever to put a face on them if you'd like. You can use the face that is on the pattern pieces. You can come up with your own. You could even let your kid play with some markers and have them decorate them for themselves. Completely up to you, and what your little one can handle and would like. Because I picked this crazy pattern with dots and everything, I'm actually going to leave the cat face off of mine. So let's just go through construction. You just place those right sides together and clip all the way around the outside. All the way. You just want to leave a gap for turning. So I'm going to leave a gap right here along this outside leg right here. It's a place where it doesn't have a lot of stress on the seam, like the inside of the leg. So I don't have to worry about, I'm going to be closing it with hand stitching. So I don't have to worry about the hand stitching being not as strong as machine stitching. And it's a little bit less visible than like the top of the head or something like that. So I'm going to sew all the way around here, all the way around, and back up and just leave this gap in between these two clips right here so that I can turn it right sides out. Okay, so I've sewn all the way around the outside except for this gap right here. So this is actually a super important part, so I really don't want you to skip the clipping of your curves. It is super important that anywhere that there are curves along your little dolly that you clip into the seam allowance, up to, but again, not through your stitch line. It's super important in order to get a beautiful turn on your dolly and to get nice clean lines on the outside to take the time to really clip all of your curves. You can definitely clip all the way around if you want to. I am leaving my straightaways because they don't really need it. You can definitely also trim down your seam allowance if you want, but this is a pretty narrow seam allowance to begin with. So I don't think it's really completely necessary. But I'm just going to keep trimming all the way around all of these curves until I have a nice, beautiful, ready to turn right sides out kitten. This cat is going to be so cute. Oh, and you know what, I'm going to clip off the tips of the ears too, just to reduce bulk at that point. Okay, where was I? Over here. It's always better to overclip than underclip when we're talking about curves. It's easier to turn it right side out if you have too many clips into your seam allowance than if you just don't have enough. So just all the way into that seam allowance, and look, I've made it all the way to the right, back to where I started, and we are ready to turn this thing right sides out. So you're just going to grab it gently, hopefully you reinforce your stitches right there, and just start pushing this guy so that the right side of the fabric is coming out that gap you left from sewing. And just gently pull through. And you don't have to get all the features right away, just really want to get so you have an idea of what this is and get all of those pieces to the right side. Okay, so now I'm ready to start really poking it out. I'm going to grab my chopstick here in a minute and use my chopstick to really get those features pushed out as best I can. And I'm going to go all the way through and do this. And just make sure that everything looks good. I'm going to run my chopstick along all of my sewn seams too. I really like to do that because I think that it gives me a more beautifully finished product, but it also shows me if I have any weaknesses. If I clipped too close to my seam allowance, if my fabric is just fraying a little bit and I need to take a deeper seam allowance in a specific spot. Whatever it is, it just gives me a really good idea of what's happening with those seams that I sewed. So I'm just running my chopstick along all of my seams all the way around my kitty cat. And it looks like, oh, it looks like I missed one arm. I did one arm twice and I missed the second arm. So let's get his paw all the way out. And then we are good to go. We've got a little kitty. He's looking really cute. what I'm going to do is I'm going to press. I don't want to press the whole kitty at this point because I do want him to be really stuffed and beautiful. But I'm going to press right here where I have my gap. And that's just going to make it a lot easier once I'm closing that gap to really get a nice clean finish on my clothes. And you can see that I clipped really nicely into all of my things. I don't have a lot of pulling or weird overlaps at any of my corners, and that's because I clipped all the way to my seam allowance, and it helps a lot. So what you might be saying now is I really want to make a dolly to go with this doll's house, this quiet book, but I don't have any polyfil on hand. And you know what? Me neither. You know what I'm going to use? The scraps from my serger. I have tons of these. They're really soft because I sew mostly with knits, and definitely on my serger it's mostly knits. And it's just trash anyway. So I am going to stuff my dolly with these serger scraps right here, and then I'm gonna use a slip stitch to close this. So a slip stitch, I'm going to talk through it now because it's going to be really hard to actually show it on camera. But you put a knot in the end of your thread, and you want to come up from the seam allowance up in between your layers. You come up and then you go directly across and go down a little bit and come back out and just keep going. It's like a ladder, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you pull it tight, and all of those stitches will be nice and invisible and beautiful, and you will have a wonderfully finished dolly. So I'm going to stuff it and close it, and then I will be back to show you my finished kitty cat. So we have a stuffed dolly, and we have a beautifully finished leg seam right here. So we are ready to move on. So this construction is exactly the same if you do the bear or the mouse, and you can personalize to your heart's content. You can even color block and give them a cute shirt or pants or whatever it is you want to do. Maybe use fabric to make it look like a family pet if you've got a kitten, or hopefully not a bear. I hope you don't have a bear in your house. But have fun. Make the dollies perfect for your little one, for what they wanna play with, and don't forget to share pics in the group on Facebook. Thank you. Now that we're finished sewing our entire Doll's House Quiet book, along with a little kitty dolly, let me just show you what we've done. So we have a beautiful front of the house with movable flowers, extra buttons, all the fixings for your little one to play and enjoy and just have fun. We have beautiful handles so they can carry it around, and it ties closed. On the back we have a wonderful tic-tac-toe board, so you and your little one, or if you have more than one little one, they can play together and really enjoy and practice those buttons. On the inside we made so many pages. Let's see what we made here. We have a living room with curtains and a rotary phone. You can teach your kid what that is. And it's movable and fun and beautiful. We have a bedroom where a dolly can take a nap. We have a little pull cord on a lamp and some beautiful floral buttons. We have the dream craft room, so you can have the sewing studio of your dreams, or your little one can play. If they keep you company in your studio, they can have their own little studio to play in. We have a fishing pond, which is just so cute, with little fish that can swim and jump and play and have a good time. We have, let's get Dolly out of here, we have a little tent where Dolly can sleep some more. I think Dolly's going to be sleeping a lot. But a beautiful little tent for all of your camping needs and fun with none of the bugs involved. And a beautiful fire pit so you can roast your pretend s'mores with your little ones. No calories included. So we have a few hacks here. I talked about some alternative materials if you don't have everything you need on hand and either can't or don't want to leave the house. We talked about different stuffing options. This guy is stuffed with fabric scraps, so it's environmentally friendly as well, because those are now not going in the trash. We used some alternative batting for a couple of our pages, and an alternative to stuffing in our pillow as well. But the options on this are truly limitless. You have the base here to create exactly what you or your little one are looking for in a quiet book. This is just the main pattern too. So I have the main pattern plus a couple of hacks here for you, but there's an add-on pack. So check out the add-on pack on the website and see all of the additional pages that we have put together for you. And of course, have fun with it. Be creative. Make your own pages. This is a great base to have really whatever you're looking for in a quiet book. Any interest that you or your little one have that you might want to put on fabric. So thank you so much for joining us for this sew along. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. And I hope that you're inspired to sew up a doll's house quiet book for your little one. Or yourself. Thank you so much for joining us. Please share in the RP Sew Along Facebook group and in the main Rebecca Page Sewing group on Facebook as well. We'd love seeing all of the creative things that you make, particularly when you get to include your little kiddos in the project with you. Hope to see you next time. Have a good one.